All right, today's lesson is called the distance between two rational numbers. We actually did this a little bit yesterday. The last problem in your homework that was listed as that challenge problem, you were finding the distance in the elevation. One was above sea level, one was below. So this lesson just kind of formalizes what we started doing a little bit of yesterday. And this goes again, same three standards. We're still going to be talking about a number line, and we are also going to be adding and subtracting rational numbers without using a number line. And our objectives are, how can I find the distance between two rational numbers? So what's a way to find the distance both with and without the number line? And how can I find the change between two rational numbers? Distance and change are handled just a little bit differently, and we'll be looking at that. All right, so the first example asks person A to do 3 problems and person B to do 3 problems. What you're going to do is plot those 2 points on the number line and just count how far apart they are. So if you are, let's see how we want to do this. If you are a 1, I think you guys would all be 1s, right? Or a, what's your decimal number? Some of your numbers have gotten obscured. So the first row will do A. The second row this way will do B, A, B, A, B. Irene, you'll do A, and Carly will do B. That way you can discuss it with the person behind you. So let's take a minute and do that. You can discuss your results with your partner and compare A to B. Okay, so the distance between -4 and 5, if we put a point on -4 and 5, you can hardly see up here, we find that those points are 9 units apart. Person B, raise your hand and tell me what's the distance between 5 and -4, Grace?
9 units.
Okay, also 9 units. Okay, person A, tell me what's the distance between -5 and -3, Irene?
2 units.
2 units. All right, person B, tell me what's the distance between -3 and -5, Jimmy?
2.
Also 2 units. Person A, tell me the difference between 7 and -1. Do I have another person A to volunteer? Violet? What?
8.
8 units. Good. Okay, and a person B to tell me the distance between -1 and 7. Dakota?
8 units.
Also 8 units. Okay, why do you think the answer was the same? Jake?
All they did was switch the equation around.
Yeah, they switched the order of the numbers or the equation. It's not really an equation because there's no equal sign up there, but they switched the orders of the number around, but they were still the same 2 numbers. You can also think of it when you're calculating distance, it doesn't matter whether you start at the first point and go to the second point or whether you start at the second point and go to the first point. So if I start here and I travel this way, that's 9 units. But if I start here and travel this way, that's also 9 units. It's like traveling somewhere. When I travel to work, it takes me about 13 minutes to get to work. I'm not sure how many miles it is. Maybe it's like 10 miles. I don't even know. But it would be 10 miles for me to get to work. It's also 10 miles for me to get back. It does not change unless I go a different way.
Or different speed.
Well, it's still the same distance no matter how fast I go.
Yeah,
It would take me a different amount of time if I were going a different speed. Could we use a number line for every situation in real life? No, we're going to have a lot of numbers that are very large that are not going to fit on a number line. So we don't always want to use a number line. What's something we can think of? A word maybe that we've used in the past. You can look at the poster there that might represent distance. Adria?
The additive inverse.
Not additive inverse.
Absolute value.
The absolute value. Absolute value is always positive, so is distance. Distance is always positive. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to think of what we could use as a formula to figure out absolute value. So we're not actually going to give you the formula, but I want you to do the next 3 problems. Everyone will do these, and then we'll come back and talk about this. Caleb, what's the difference between 0 and negative 8? 8. The distance is just 8. Any questions about why the distance is 8? All eyes should be up here, mouth closed. Any questions about why the distance is 8, Devin?
Because it's 8 units away from 0.
No, I'm asking if you have any questions about why it's 8. But very nice explanation, Devin.
Okay.
Okay, part B, what is the distance between negative 2 and negative half, Adria?
1/2.
Just 1/2. Any questions about that one? Okay, Michaela, what's the distance between negative 6 and negative 10?
4.
4, good. Okay, let's take a look at the next example. We're going to talk about how we can do this without using the number line. So when we're finding the distance between negative 3 and 2, what we've been doing when we do the number line is we start on an endpoint. So we put negative 4, negative 2. We start on an endpoint and we count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 units. So we know that that distance is 5 units. If we want to put this into a formula, any ideas about how we could use those 2 numbers to figure out the distance without using a number line? Devin, what do you think?
Okay, if there are 2 negative numbers, you can subtract the higher negative number by the lower.
Mhm.
You get the answer to that. But if there's a positive and a negative, you can add them together to get the answer, and that's the same thing with positive and positive.
Okay, excellent, excellent. So Devin explained this, and I'm just going to repeat this because I don't know how much that picked up, that if the numbers are both negative, you would subtract the absolute values of the number, and you would get the answer. If one is negative and one is positive, you would have to add the absolute values together. Irene?
Yes, I was going to say the same thing.
Yeah, excellent. All right, so using a formula, we're going to take the absolute value of the difference between the numbers, which will work out to be exactly what Devin said. So in this case, we would do negative 3 minus 2, or we could do 2 minus a negative 3. Either would work. The absolute value of that is negative 5, and the absolute value of negative 5 is 5. Or we could do it the other way. Doesn't matter which way we do it. We could start with the 2, and we could subtract a negative 3. In that case, this becomes 2 plus 3, which is 5, and the absolute value of 5 is just 5. So no matter which one you start with, if you find the difference between the 2 numbers and then take the absolute value of that, you're going to get the answer. So down here it says for 2 rational numbers P and Q, the distance between P and Q is just the absolute value of P minus Q. So I wrote it a little more simply down here, subtract the numbers and take the absolute value. And then distance is always positive. So we never list distance as a negative number. It's always a positive unit. Okay, any questions about that?
So it doesn't matter if it's, so it just matters what the absolute value is?
What the absolute value of the difference is. You want to subtract the numbers first and then take the absolute value. Okay? Okay, let's take a look at this one. Change in elevation versus distance. Distance is positive, as I just told you. We never express distance as a negative number. But change in elevation or temperature can be positive or negative. So when we're talking about change, change might actually be negative. For example, we might say that the temperature, there was a negative 3 degree change in the temperature, which means that it went down 3 degrees. So when we're talking about change, sometimes we will have negative numbers. Part A says a hiker starts hiking at the beginning of a trail at a point which is 200 feet below sea level. And I put a number line up here. I'm going to put these points approximately on the number line. So I'm going to say that 0 is sea level. So I'll draw a little C there. Okay, that's sea level. And he is 200 feet below sea level. So he starts on the trail here at negative 200. He hikes to a location on the trail that is 580 feet above sea level. So these words are important to make sure you don't miss them as you're reading. 580 feet above sea level. So starting at 0, if I put negative 200 there, positive 200 would be about here. Positive 400 maybe would be here. Positive 600 would be up here somewhere. So 580 would probably be like here. So this is the point he went to. He went from negative 200 and he hiked all the way to 580. The first question asks, what is the vertical distance between 200 feet below sea level and 580 feet above sea level? So if we look at the number line, it's kind of obvious that we would have to add 200, because it's 200 units from the negative 200 to the 0, and then 580. But if we do it using the formula, we could start at either number. So we could do negative 200 minus 580. And if we rewrite that as addition, that's negative 200 plus a negative 580. Same signs, we add and keep. So we would get negative 780. And the absolute value is always positive. So we would have 780 feet. That's the distance that he traveled, the vertical distance. I want to ask you though, if he were then, actually, no, let's save that for B. Let's save that for B. Okay, then it says, how should we interpret 780 feet in the context of this problem? Does anybody want to take a stab at that? That's already kind of an obvious answer. It's not, but you have to know what they're asking. Anyone want to try that? How should we interpret 780 feet in the context of this problem? What's the 780 telling us? Grace?
He's 780 feet above sea level.
Well, no, he's not 780 feet above sea level. He's actually 580 feet above sea level. Violet?
He hiked 780.
Yeah, he hiked. That's the total amount that he hiked. So this is basically summing up our answer in a sentence. So he hiked 780 feet. And I'm going to just flesh this out a little bit to get, switch colors, from where he started to where he ended. So from beginning to end, he hiked 780 feet. Okay. Part B says that after lunch, the hiker hiked back down the trail from the point of elevation, which is 580 feet above sea level, to the beginning of the trail, which is 200 feet below sea level. So this is what he did before lunch. After lunch, he did the same thing. So this is after lunch. He didn't do the same thing. I should have said he did the same thing. He went the same amount. He went the same distance, but he went in an opposite direction. So when it asks for the vertical distance between 580 feet above sea level and 200 feet below sea level, is that different than it was when we went from 200 below to 580 above? No, it's easy to see on a number line that that is still the same distance. Let's see, here it is. So the distance is still 780 feet. But I want to ask you also about change. If we were to talk about the change in elevation, in the first scenario, when he traveled from negative 200 to 580, and he went this way, would that be a positive or negative change? You can just say it. It would be a positive change, but after lunch when he hiked from the top back down to the bottom, is that a positive or negative change? It's a negative change. Good. So distance is always positive, but change can be either way depending on which direction we're going in. So part 2, where it asks what is the change in elevation, you would want to say that it's negative 780 feet, because when he traveled back down, it changed by getting lower. Okay, exercise 3, I want you to think about for a minute. The distance between a negative and a positive number is 12.5. What are the numbers? So this has many possibilities. There's not just one set of numbers that would give you that distance. There could be a variety. So I want you to think about this for a second, and I'm going to call on a few of you to tell me some numbers, and hopefully we get some different lists. Okay, let's look at some of the possibilities here. Zoe, what's the pair of numbers that you came up with?
-2 and 10.
-2, whoops. -2 and 10. Okay, so if we were to plot those on a number line, let's take a second to do that. We would have, let's put 0 here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And -2 would be here. My spacing's a little off there. So I see a distance here of exactly 12, but I want 12.5. So how could you change one of those numbers to give you an extra half units distance? You could make it 10.5. Good. Okay, another pair of numbers. McKenna.
+5 and -7.5.
Okay, +5, -7.5. Let's take a look at that. So if we were at +5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and down here, let's see, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and we'd have to go one more. If we went to -7.5, we'd have a distance of 12 units between -5 and -7, and then another half a unit. So that's a good one. All right, one more. Pat, what did you have?
I had -12.5 and 0.
Okay, -12.5 and 0. That's a great one. That, of course, would work. Okay, very good. Let's move on.
Just laughing.
Yes.
How can it be 0 if it says a negative number and a positive number?
Oh, you're right. You're right. You can't use 0 because it's a negative number and a positive number. Pat, 0 is not negative or positive, so you can't actually use 0. So yes, this would be true that the distance between these would be 12.5, but technically you're not following the directions with that. Devin, you want to give us another pair?
-6.5 and 6.
-6.5
Considered negative
and 6. It's neither.
It's nothing.
It's not negative or positive. Yes.
Can I get one?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, -11.5 and 1.
All right, good. -11.5 and 1. Thoughts?
2 and 14.5.
2 and 14.5. Well, that wouldn't work for the directions because it's supposed to be negative and
It'd be
positive.
16.5.
So you can't actually, that's true. That gives you the right distance. It's just not following the directions. Elena?
-1/2 and 12.
-1/2 and 12. Good. That works. Okay, good. You guys came up with good answers in a pretty short amount of time. For exercise 4, exercise 4 has A, B, C, D, and E. It has 5 parts. This is something I'm going to have you work on independently for a while. We may or may not check the answers before the bell, but we certainly will go over the answers. Please raise your hand if you're having trouble as you're working on this, and I'll come around and help you. There we go. Okay, so you kind of have an advantage today in that you've seen your exit ticket, so you know what the exit ticket is looking for, and some of you have said, what does it mean, formula and number line? Well, all of these problems ask you to use the distance formula to find each answer, and then support your answer using a number line diagram. So that's what they mean by a formula, is using the formula that we're going to use to find this distance before we use a number line. Okay. Riley, what would we write? What would be our formula for part A? That would be perhaps the answer, but what's the formula? How do we arrive at that answer without using a number line?
-7 plus 4.
Not plus. Well, yeah, actually, you're right. You do end up doing +4. But what does it start out as? We're finding, whoops, I'm writing in white. We're finding the difference. So it starts out as -7 minus -4. Good. -7 minus -4. That's what it means by using the distance formula. It's just finding the difference between the numbers and then taking the absolute value of that. So then Riley already said this is really just -7 plus 4. But I want you to write it out as subtraction first, then change it to addition. Then you get the absolute value of -3, which is 3. And she gave us the answer right off the bat. So Riley had no trouble finding the answer. And then to support your answer using a number line diagram, you would need a number line that includes -7 and -4. You can go a little further. It doesn't have to be a complete number line as long as it contains those 2 points. You would show that the distance between those points is 3 units. Okay, so that's what I'm looking for on the exit ticket, that you know to find the difference of the two numbers and then also to show it on the number line. Okay, part B, find the change in temperature. If the temperature rises from -18 degrees Fahrenheit to 15 degrees Fahrenheit. Braden, how would I write that out in the formula?
You would do, essentially 15 minus 18,
-18. So we could start with, doesn't matter which one we start with. We're going to go 15. Well, actually, yeah, let's do it that way. 15 minus a -18. Okay, then what does that become if we write that as addition, Brayden?
23.
No, if we rewrite this as addition, so let's now start with 15 plus what? Subtracting is the same as adding the opposite. Yeah, we need the opposite, so we're adding the opposite. And 15 plus 18 is not 23, but we're missing a 10 there. 33. Yeah, it's 33. And the absolute value of 33 is just 33. And then you have a little more space than I do. It asks you to use a vertical number line. So I'm just going to kind of draw mine off to the side. So on your vertical number line, as long as you have a 0, you can show 15. -18 is going to be a little farther away from 0 than -15 was. So I'm going to put it down here. The distance between the two would be 18 units here plus 15 units there. And the temperature is rising. So we used the distance formula. We got an answer of 33. But part C asks us, would your answer for part B be different if the temperature dropped from 15 to -15? Would we use a different answer, Katie?
You would have
You would have the stuff. What do you mean by that? Now, when we're talking about distance is always positive. But when we're talking about change can be positive or negative. So if the temperature is rising, is that a positive or negative thing? So now in part C, if the temperature dropped, would that be positive or negative? That would be negative. So you would want to express this as a negative 33 degrees Fahrenheit because the temperature drops instead of rises. So you have to be careful whether they're asking for distance or whether they're asking for change. Okay, part D, Beryl is the first person to finish a 5K race and is standing 15 feet beyond the finish line. Another runner, Jeremy, is currently trying to finish the race and has approximately 14 feet before he reaches the finish line. What is the minimum possible distance between Beryl and Jeremy? And it could just say what is the distance. When it says minimum possible, it's saying, well, it says he has approximately 14 feet. So what's the minimum possible distance? This one, I found it more helpful to actually draw a picture first before I wrote the equation. But if you're finding distance, you're just using the distance formula. But still, it's helpful to kind of put it on the number line to see where the points are positioned. So I'm actually going to do that. Barrel, let's say that the finish line is 0. So here's the finish line. Barrel is 15 feet beyond the finish line. So Barrel's over here. He's at 15 feet. Jeremy is 14 feet before the finish line. So he's over here, not quite as far away from 0 as Jeremy. Barrel is at negative 14. Now it's easier for me to apply the formula because I put those into my mind as far as which one is positive and which one is negative. Ailey, how would I write a formula? Not plus. When we're finding distance, we're finding the difference. So minus 15. And what else do we need to do if we're finding distance? Good. Put the absolute value signs. Okay, Ailey, let's rewrite that as addition. So negative 14 plus, good, plus negative 15. And what would your answer be? Negative 29, and if we take the absolute value of negative 29, that is just 29. So the distance between them is 29 feet. And you can see that on the number line, the distance from negative 14 to 0 is 14. The distance from 0 to 15 is 15, so we're adding them together. Okay, the next question asks, what is the change in elevation from 140 feet above sea level to 40 feet below sea level? Dakota, is this going to be an absolute value kind of problem, or do the positive and negative matter in this problem?
Positive and negative.
Yeah, positive and negative matter. How do you know that?
Well, it says 140 feet above, which is positive, and then it says 40 feet below, which is negative.
Okay, true enough. But in distance problems, we sometimes have positive and negative numbers, but we always get a positive answer for distance problems. How do you know this just isn't just a regular distance problem? What's it asking you for? The change, there we go. That's our key word. If it's asking for change, we do care about the answer being positive or negative. Good. Devin, what equation could we write for this?
140 minus negative 40 equals 180.
Okay, so you're saying 140 minus negative 40. Okay, what would that equal?
Uh, 140 plus negative 40 and
No, it wouldn't be. What you said a second ago was 140 minus a negative 40. Devin, how would you rewrite that as addition?
140 plus negative 40.
No. When we subtract, it's the same as adding the opposite. So we need to not add negative 40, but the opposite of negative 40, which is
40.
40, yeah. So what is the change? What's 140 plus 40?
Oh, 180.
180. Okay, now, is that accurate that you should have a positive answer, Devin?
Yes.
Does anyone disagree with that?
No, I'm so confused.
Should this be a positive answer? Is the change positive? Read.
No, because you're going from 100 feet above sea level to 40 feet
To 40 feet below. So what's happening here is we're starting, here's sea level, we're starting at 140 feet above sea level. We're going to 40 feet below. So we're going down. So we want our answer to be negative. So technically, you should have done negative 40 minus 140, and then you would have gotten an answer of negative 180. But sometimes it is hard to decide, well, which way should I subtract this? It doesn't really matter which way you subtract it, because you're going to get 180 regardless. But then think at the end, what happened in this? Did it change from lower to higher, or did it change from higher to lower? So you're going to want to give your answer as negative 180 feet. That's the change in the elevation. It's a negative change because he's going down. I guess it doesn't say anything about he. I don't even know if it's talking about a person, but the change in elevation is negative. Okay, any questions before you do your exit ticket? Exit ticket is just one question. I'm going to give you a limit of 5 minutes, and after that we'll be doing our facts test.